The shir tonight is dedicated by somebody who plays a special part in my life, for somebody who played a very special part in her life. It's dedicated by Desi Rosenfield, who's my business partner, co-founder, and the person who runs my business for me in the United States and does an unbelievable job with our team and with our clients, and enables me to live in Eretz Israel and to study Torah and teach Torah, knowing that there is a source of parnassah. My only source of income is from the work that our business does in the United States, and so I'm indebted to her. She certainly has a part in all the Torah that I teach, but tonight specifically, she's dedicated in honor of her late father's birthday, which is on the 5th of February. His name was Aaron ben Nachum, and he's the person who gave her so much, taught her so much about not only about business, but about the ethics and integrity of business. It's he, in a sense, who's responsible for the fact that I can entrust both my business legacy and everything that I own, really, into her hands, knowing that it will be dealt with the utmost of integrity. That was something that her father lives by. He was a man of great humility, who did a fortune for others in the quietest of ways. In early days in South Africa, when he realized how early the black African workers were leaving home to get to work, he made sure that a program was established called the African Feeding Scheme to make sure that they were given breakfast when they arrived at work, because he realized there's no way they could have had anything to eat before then. Just many, many examples of that, and so grateful to Desi for what she does for me and for the business, and for all of you who are learning Torah with me, and grateful also to her father for having produced a person of such dedication, both to Judaism and to her work, and a person of such integrity. So Tu B'Shvat is a bit of a weird day, right? What happened on Tu B'Shvat? What happened on Pesach? Do we know what happened on Pesach? We all know what happened on Pesach. Do we know what happened on Shavuos? Yeah, the Torah was given on Shavuos. We know what happened on Shavuos. What happened on the fast days? Shiva Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, Asora B'Teves. We know exactly what happened. What happened on Rosh Hashanah? The world was created. Wow. Yom Kippur. Moshe comes down from Sinai. Sukkot, the Jews are in the desert and they're living in the Sukkot, Yetziat Mitzrayim. Dramatic things happen on every day we keep. What happened on Tu B'Shvat? Nothing really. And yet we don't say Tachanun. It's not a Yom Tov. We don't really do anything. So the Hasidic people do a bit of a fruit party and kind of try and make it into a bit of a Seder, but a Seder without meat. A fruit Seder. It just doesn't seem right. So what is it? What are you supposed to do on the day? What are you supposed to feel? Firstly, what is the avodah? For each Yom Tov, for each special day in the calendar, we have an avodah, we have a certain practice. There are things we're supposed to do. Sometimes things which we're not supposed to do. On Tu B'Shvat, there's nothing to do. There's nothing specific to do. There's nothing specific not to do. And yet something did happen on Tu B'Shvat. Something incredibly important happened on Tu B'Shvat, and I don't know why it's not really referred to that much. At least Shvat. We will talk about whether it was Tu B'Shvat or it was the beginning of Shvat, at least the beginning of Shvat. And as we'll see in the first Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, there's one view that the Tu B'Shvat is actually on ROSH CHODESH Shvat. It's on Thursday. So at least on ROSH CHODESH Shvat, something really important happened in Jewish history. There are not a lot of months that are mentioned in the Torah. Vayehi ba'arba'im shana ba'ashtei chodesh be'echad lachodesh. And it was, after 40 years, on the 11th month. In the Torah we count the months from Nisan. The 11th month is Shvat. On the 11th month, be'echad lachodesh, on Rosh Chodesh, that's Thursday coming, what happened? Diber Moshe b'nei Yisrael kechol asher tzivah Hashem oto alehem. Moshe started his final speech. He gave his last shir on the 1st of Shvat, on the last year of the time that they were in the desert. Be'ever Yarden, be'eretz Moav, ho'il Moshe be'er et haTorah hazot. Moshe taught us the Torah for the first time. Now, obviously, we were learning things all the way through the 40 years. But this be'er et haTorah, he explained the Torah for the first time. The first time the Jews had access to understanding the Torah was on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. The month of Shvat is when that happened. Rashi says that was the time when he gave it in 70 different languages. We spoke at a recent Matmonim about what that means. But even leaving aside the 70 languages, we'll get into it a little bit more deeply, what he did, but something significant happened. Something happened on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which then continued until he died, where Moshe gave us an understanding, gave us insight into the Torah. That was the month of Shvat. So the month of Shvat is no less important than the month of Sivan, when the Torah was given to us. No less important than the month of Tishrei in many ways. This was the beginning of a new way of understanding the Torah. Started in Chodesh Shvat. So that we have mention of it in the Torah. Nothing about trees, nothing about the environment, nothing about fruits, about Torah. Tu B'Shvat, or the month of Shvat, is a significant day in the system of Torah and in the life of Torah. In the Mishnah we have the Arba Rosh Hashanah. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, the Mishnah says at the beginning of Masechta Rosh Hashanah, and one of them is Be'echad B'Shvat, on the 1st of Shvat, which is that day that Moshe started teaching the Torah, which is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. Who's Ilan? Where does he come from all of a sudden? Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. This is such an important day. Moshe started to explain the Torah, and the Mishnah says nothing about it. The Torah says nothing about the trees, and the Mishnah says nothing about the Torah. The Mishnah talks about the trees, and the Torah talks about the Torah. Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. It's the Rosh Hashanah of the Ilan, and it doesn't say Le'ilanot. All the other Rosh Hashanahs are in the plural. It doesn't say it's the Rosh Hashanah for trees. It's the Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, for the tree. Divrei Beis Shammai, that's Beis Shammai's system. Beit Hillel omrim b'chamisha asar bo, and Beit Hillel says on the 15th of Shvat. We're not going to go into whether it's the 15th or the 1st. There is a Yom Tov called Tu B'Shvat, which we now call Tu B'Shvat. We wouldn't have called it Tu B'Shvat had we gone with Beit Shammai all the way, but it doesn't matter. We know what this day is. We know what this day is called. It's called Tu B'Shvat, and it celebrates the trees in whatever way, and we know the Rashi and the Rav on the Mishnah gives us all the details, the Gemara itself. It's a very technical thing, this Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. It's how you count the Shemitah with, as far as the fruit is concerned, and Ma'aser Sheni, when you count the Ma'aser Sheni from the time that the fruit trees blossom, and did they blossom before Tu B'Shvat or after Tu B'Shvat. It's very technical halachot. It's not as romantic as we make it sound. It's just a technical date, a time that we put that gives us a method of deciding whether the fruits have developed before, as part of this year or part of last year. And yet the wording, the Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, the tree, capital T again, the tree, 2 capital T's, seems to signify something else is going on. So often when we talk about the months, we use the Bnei Yisachar. The Bnei Yisachar, as we've mentioned before, is a remarkable Hasidic Rebbe who learnt with the great Hasidic Rabbeim, had access to the Chosei Lublin right in the early days of Hasidus, and a big Mekubal, a big Kabbalist, and a big Talmid Chacham also. He wrote this work, the Bnei Yisachar, on the calendar, and he goes through the calendar month by month, with primarily Kabbalistic understandings of the energies of the month and what they mean, and he's one of the classic sources for understanding the months of the year. And he says here, very well quoted Bnei Yisachar, Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, lo amar le'ilanot, k'mo be'inach. He's one of the few people who stops at this point and says, it says ilan in the singular, not in the plural. What's it trying to say? Yesh l'ramez ma shekibalnu mirabotenu. This seems to point towards that which we've learned from our rabbis. He was a Talmid of the Kotzker Rebbe, among others. The Kotzker Rebbe influenced him too. And the Kotzker Rebbe took Tu B'Shvat very seriously, as did some of the other Rabbeim, the Chidush Arim and others took Tu B'Shvat very seriously. And on Tu B'Shvat, he says, the minhag was Litzpalel b'Tu B'Shvat al Etrog kasher yafeh. When do you start worrying about your esrog? I do it sometime after Yom Kippur. But that's not the time to start worrying about your esrog, because by that time your esrog is already well developed. It's ready to be acquired. But it's been in the process of production for months and months. The time to start thinking about the esrog is now. Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat, why not before? 8 months before. It's the only time in the year and in your life that you have to have a particular fruit on a particular day. Every other fruit, if it's a few days late, if it's a few months late, if it's you import from somewhere else, if you can't import from somewhere else, you wait for it. You don't have to have oranges on a particular day, apples on a particular day, figs on a particular day. Esrog has to be on the 15th of Tishrei. You have to have an esrog, no matter what. I can't say, but the esrogs are late this year. There was a storm, they were damaged. That's a serious problem. You can't say, well, okay, we'll do it next week. And it's not so simple that they're available. They become available not that long before the 15th of Tishrei. So to have an esrog ready to be used on the 15th of Tishrei, Hashem needs to start planning it now. That's when it has to be. Yaela, what were we talking about? How long did it take for various shidduchim to kind of take place? Years and years before things to get into place, for the pieces to fall into place. The grandparents to meet and have children, and the children to meet each other, and for them to have children, and those children to meet each other. A whole lot of stuff has to evolve before timing can be accurate, before things can be timed that way. And so it is with an esrog. And what's important with Tu B'Shvat is to tune into the timing, to realize now's the time to start thinking esrog. I suffer from a disease. They call it procrastination. I think now is a disease or it isn't disease, but I've discovered since that nearly everybody does. So I don't feel particularly special about it. But my wife's trying to teach me that if you've got to be in Yerushalim at a shir at 8:30, then and you're in Ra'anana, at like 4 o'clock you've got to start thinking about it. And there's a time you've got to start figuring out. It takes you an hour and a half to get there, and you've got to start getting things going well before the time. For me, until 8:30, I'm not late. And then at 8:30, I'm terribly late. But it's something we need to be sensitive with life. That all the things we need to happen at specific times have to start happening long before that time. How long does it take you to plan a Pesach for your clients, a year? You start a year before you're ready. So those people who've got businesses that are time dependent know what it is to plan. They know what it is to put things in place so that in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, project planners, their whole profession is that. How do you stack things up in a way that at the right time, the right things come together and that things can occur? But most of us don't live in that space. But Tu B'Shvat brings us back into that space. We don't have it with other mitzvahs. Pesach, just before Pesach, we start going crazy and we're cleaning the house and we're looking for matzah and we're organizing and it's kind of last minute-ish and we can get away with it. And our sukkahs, we're building and we build our sukkah last minute. But esrog has to start blossoming. And now's when it starts blossoming. And the quality of that esrog and the timing of that esrog, how much rain that esrog is going to get, how much sunshine that esrog is going to get, that's determined now. That's determined this month. It's determined on Thursday according to Beis Shammai, and on Tu B'Shvat according to Beis Hillel. As Rashi explains in Gemara Rosh Hashanah further on, this is the day when the sap starts entering the trees develop moisture. And every Jew's zchut, every Jew's stature feeds in to the capacity of the world to produce esrogim for the Jewish people. Each one of us are contributing to that. The level we're on is going to make a difference to nature and to the way the esrog will be produced. What a day to daven for an esrog. But not just for an esrog. This is the day where the energy of growth is rooted. If you want to know a day when the energy of growth, tshuva is rooted in Rosh Hashanah and in Chodesh Elul. And Avelus is rooted in Tisha B'Av. And Simcha is rooted in Purim. Tzmicha, the ability of organisms to grow, that energy has its root in Tu B'Shvat. And what a day to daven. for growth. And that doesn't mean just growth of your esrog. We're using the esrog here as a focal point, as a way to focus on the concept of growth. But the concept of growth applies to other species, it applies to agriculture as a whole, and it applies to people as well. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, we're told in Parsha Shoftim, and in Kabbalah that's often used, that we have a lot in common with a tree. The individual human being has a lot in common with a tree. And one of the things that we have in common with the tree is this sense of we're an organic evolution of something that started long before the time that we're needed. She's damen lo, and what should we daven? Apart from growth, she's damen lo, Hashem yisborach le'et hamitztarech, et hapri et sadar. This is the time to make a tefillah. I want a beautiful esrog. And it's hard to relate to it because nowadays you go to the esrog markets in Israel and you've got hundreds and thousands of esrogim to choose from, and you find one according to your ability to afford one and something that you like. And we think it's just a commodity that you can buy at a market. It's almost tragic that it's become commoditized. You go to the market to buy an esrog. No, you go to the market to buy a cabbage. You go to the market to buy IBM stock. You don't go to the market to buy an esrog. An esrog is being prepared for you. An esrog will find you. But you've got to open yourself to being found by the esrog. And when you go to the market, that's the way to go to the market. Not to look and say, which esrog do I want? Try next year going to the market and saying, which esrog wants me? And just see whether there's an esrog that talks to you. If there's an esrog there that says, hey, I'm here, I want you. And that's your esrog. And that's the esrog that was grown for you over 8 months starting at Tu B'Shvat. When you davened, when you asked for that esrog, that you should have such a relationship with an esrog. And one understands how the Gedolim were so taken with this mitzvah and struggled so much to perform it. Of course, in Europe, in the winter times, it wasn't easy to get an esrog. Sometimes there was one esrog for a whole village, for a whole town. And they used to share it among themselves. That's why we've got all these dinim of, can you give your esrog to somebody else? Can you lend the esrog to somebody else? Because they didn't have more than one or two. It was very, very rare. Today, there's brocha, and we've got in most parts of the world, we have easy access to esrogim, but we shouldn't lose that essential connection and relationship with the esrog. And just make it a commodity, a thing that we buy. Look at that phrase. And the tefillah will produce fruit. That's interesting. Tefillah, producing fruit. We always think of fruit as something you eat on Tu B'Shvat. We always think of fruit as something that you pluck off a tree or you buy at the supermarket. The idea that fruit comes from tefillah. So here we have an interesting overlay of metaphor. We've got Tu B'Shvat where we're davening for the esrog, which is an item of fruit, and we've got the fruit of our tefillot. We daven, and the tefillot yield fruit. We'll discuss that in a moment. V'zeu sheramaz hatana ba'omro lashon yachid le'ilan, and that's why the Mishnah says not le'ilanot. We're not talking about all trees. We're talking about le'ilan. This is the Rosh Hashanah for the esrog. That's what Tu B'Shvat is really about. It's about the ilan of the esrog. Lahorot al ha'ilan hamiyuchad. It points to the specific tree, hamavuar b'Torah lemitzvah. That tree which is pointed out specifically by the Torah to be a mitzvah. That means recognizing the organic nature of the esrog. And I might say, well, obviously an esrog is organic, esrog is a growing fruit, but what does it mean for something to be organic? What it means for something to be organic, particularly if we're talking about a fruit, is to understand that the fruit is an outcome, it's a product of an organism. It's not the organism. It's the output of an organism. It's part of a system. So if you want your fruit to be delicious and beautiful, what do you have to tend to? If you're talking about yirakot, if you're talking about vegetables, what do you tend to? If you want nice lettuce and nice radishes, you tend to the lettuce and the radish. If you want a nice esrog, what do you tend to? Forget about the esrog. You don't have to worry about the esrog. Watch the tree. Just nurture the tree. That's what an organic product means. It's a product of an organism. And you need to nurture the organism, not the product. Too often we focus on the product. And we don't understand a product is the outcome of an organism. It's part of a system. And you've got to keep the whole system healthy. Because if the system is kept healthy, the product is a natural outcome. It's an important principle in business, as you know. There are some businesses who regard profits as their purpose of being. But there's a completely different way to look at business. Business is about serving customers. There's a system. There's an investment involved. There's managing the investment. There are efficiencies. There's production. There's resources. There's labor. All of this goes into the system. What you need to do is nurture the system. If you're nurturing the system, the payrus are there. If you're nurturing the system, the profits are there. When you're playing tennis, you don't have to look at the scoreboard. Look at the ball. Look at your fellow players. The scoreboard will take care of itself. If you take your eye off the game, and you look at the scoreboard, you lose points. Immediately you begin to fail. A business that has its eye on profits loses its profits. A business that has its eye on the system, on the whole system, and the health of the whole system, and the sustainability of the whole system, is able to build up profits over a long, sustainable period of time. That's what Tu B'Shvat is here to teach us. It's not just about the esrog. It's about the understanding of the relationship between Peirus and the Eitz, between the organism and the fruit of the organism. Tefillah is the organism. The outcome, we think in Tefillah, what should I focus on when I'm davening? I'm davening for Parnassah. I want to have a good material year this year. What do I focus on? Where's my attention? On the bank account when I'm davening? No, you don't have to think about the bank account at all. You're focusing on your relationship with Hashem. You're focusing on the conversation you're having. You're focusing on the emotional connection between you and Hashem. You're focusing on the organism. The organism is your relationship with Hashem. Your organism is the minyan that's standing around you. The organism is a whole system. It's the Jewish people. It's the way you answer Kedusha and Kaddish. It's the tzedakah you give before you daven. It's the learning you do before and after the davening. It's all part of the organism. Don't worry about the outcome. Do the davening right. Take care of the organism. Take care of the davening. And the fruit will result. It's Paris. That's how fruit works. That's the message of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is understanding what a Pri is and what an Ilan is. This is a Rosh Hashanah le'ilan, not lePri. It's interesting that we eat fruit on Tu B'Shvat. We make a bit of a service around the eating of fruit. No, but not the trees. We don't go dancing around trees on Tu B'Shvat. Because the important thing is to celebrate that new understanding that fruit is an outcome, fruit is not an end point. Fruit is a result of doing a whole lot of other things properly, and that's the idea of the system and of the organism. And that organism applies to the whole of Torah. Eitz Chaim hi lemachzikim ba, that the Torah is an Eitz Chaim, an Eitz again. Here that is, the Torah is a tree. What does it mean it's a tree? The Torah is not a tree. The Torah is an organism. It's living, and it has fruit. And it needs to be nurtured and taken care of in exactly the same way as a tree does. And therefore it's an Eitz Chaim. Torah gives life, it energizes, it vitalizes lamachazikim ba. If you invest in Torah, if you take care of the system. And we have become so commoditized and so digitalized and so data-based that we don't understand. And we don't have the time and the inkling to make the effort of investing in the system of Torah rather than cutting and pasting some ideas. I've got to say a vote at the table tonight. What's it going to be? Let me find something online, or let me get something. That's not a system. That's plucking fruit without nurturing the tree. The way to do it is to learn. The way to do it is to invest in the learning, to invest in your relationship with the Torah. And the fruit comes, the fruit results. That becomes a natural outcome. And you get such happiness and well-being from investing, from giving to Torah, not to the mitzvot. Don't worry about the mitzvot. The mitzvot will come to Torah. It's the tree that needs to be taken care of. It's the earth in which the tree is planted. It's the environment in which the tree is. It's not just the tree. If you're going to take care of the tree, that means taking care of everything around the tree, taking care of the earth, pruning the tree. There are times when pieces of the tree have to be cut off. One really has to be invested in the tree. One has to be invested in the system. And that's the difference between the brachot of Borei Pri Ha'adama and Borei Pri Ha'etz. That's why they're two different brachot. If you're eating vegetable, it's a product of the land. It's not a product of a system. It's the cabbage is just the cabbage. It's not part of a system. Yes, it's also part of the whole environment, but it doesn't have a tree. Fruit is borei pri ha'etz. The health and the taste and the health of the fruit is a function of the health of the tree. The health of the cabbage is a function of the health of a cabbage. There's nothing else to it. Good cabbage, that's it. A good piece of fruit comes from a healthy tree. The tree has roots, the tree has branches, the tree has leaves, the tree has a history, the tree has a background, the tree is functioning, the tree is healthy. There's a fortune that goes into being a tree that can produce the fruit that is needed. And so, what is the connection then between what happened in Parshas Dvarim, Moshe teaching the Torah for the first time in that way in the month of Shvat, and this being the Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan? The Chidushei Harim brings, this is brought by the Sefer, the Ramatayim Tzofim, who is a person who had amazing connections with all the great Hasidic Rebbes of that time, and apparently had an incredible memory and recorded a lot of the stories we know, for example, of the Kotzker Rebbe, not just the stories, a lot of his sayings. He never wrote, he didn't write any Sforim, I don't think any at all. Most of it has come through others, particularly through the Ramatayim Tzofim. And he brings in the name of the Chidushei Harim, which is the founder of the Geira movement, the Geira Rebbe, שאמר לפרש על דרך רמז שבאחד בשבט הועיל משה בארץ התורה, ואז מתעורר השגת תורה שבעל פה. It's after Shvat that you get new insights into the oral law. And Torah Sheba'al Peh is everything that we learned. It's all the new ideas. It's all the innovation that has come from Torah. ואמר שמכיר חידושים של תורה שקודם אחד בשבט ומה שאחר אחד בשבט. And he says when he learns a piece of Torah or his own Torah or somebody tells him something, he can tell whether it was produced before Rosh Chodesh Shvat or after Rosh Chodesh Shvat. The Torah that is produced after Rosh Chodesh Shvat, if it's fruit, if it's the product of work, it's not just a cut and paste, it's something that's not just a quotation. It's worked as the tree has been taken care of, and out of that blossoms a new idea. The quality of ideas that blossom after Rosh Chodesh Shvat are completely different, says the Chidushei Harim, from the quality that existed before. I told the story in a shir recently about Baruch Ber, where a young man in the yeshiva asked him a question, and he immediately gave the answer. Baruch gave a shir, a person asked him a question, and he immediately gave an answer to the young man. The next morning, he comes to the yeshiva and he calls for the young man. He wants to speak to him again. He calls the young man. He said, that question you asked me yesterday was a great question. Here's the answer. The boy listens in astonishment and he says, Rabbi Ber, that's exactly what you told me yesterday. Word for word, it's exactly what you told me. He said, yes, but yesterday it wasn't Torah. Today it's Torah. Yesterday I gave it to you off the cuff. It's an idea that came to my mind. That's how I answered it. But it wasn't the product of labor. And therefore it doesn't classify as Torah. I went back and I worked on that question. And I worked on it. As it happens, what emerged was the same as I said yesterday. So I got it right yesterday. But that doesn't mean that yesterday was Torah. What I'm telling you today has Torah. And that means that there's a qualitative difference in hearing something from somebody who has nurtured the tree so that the fruit has evolved, to one who's just plucked a piece of fruit off a tree as they're passing by. And so much of our Torah, and certainly in the other areas of wisdom of the world that applies no less, so much of our Torah is just fruit plucked off from one place or another, put into a basket, delivered. It's commoditized, it's marketed, it's mass delivered. It's not what we're talking about here. What Tu B'Shvat is to teach us is what it is to invest in a tree, what it is to grow a system, to grow an organism, and let the fruit grow naturally. Just let the fruit grow naturally. I often say one of the hardest parts of the preparation of the Matmonim Shir that I do every day, and the day before and the morning of, one of the hardest parts is to trust that I don't have to look for something to say. Because, there's a pressure when you're giving a shir. You've got 6:30, you've got to leave the house and go to shul, and 6:40, you've got to give the shir. It's like the esrog on the 15th of Tishrei. You can't postpone it. That's when it has to be ready. So the pressure is, what am I going to say? Let me find something to say. That's not growing a tree. Finding something to say is going to the supermarket. That's not what Torah is. To be able to trust, I don't need to go to the supermarket. I'm a farmer. I'm not a trader. If I learn, if I just take a piece of Gemara and I learn it, the fruit will emerge. Something will emerge that's beautiful. Something will emerge that's relevant for people. Something will emerge that can change our lives and our insights. And thank God, every time that happens, not just with the shir, but all of you who are involved in learning, I'm sure have exactly the same experience. If you can just allow yourselves to just enjoy the process of taking care of the tree, of engaging in the learning, not worrying about what will emerge, because that's what life is. I've spent a lot of time in airports the last couple of days. It was at Kennedy Airport. There was a poster, and I don't even remember who it was. I did take a photograph of it. I don't remember the words exactly, but it was something like, every journey contains within it destinations unknown to the traveler. Something along that respect. You don't have to know the destination for every journey you go on. You have to know where you think your destination is, but be open to the fact that it might take you somewhere different, and that's okay. Because if you predetermine this is where my outcome is, then you're limiting the Ribbono Shel Olam. Why do you want to limit the Ribbono Shel Olam? The Ribbono Shel Olam has opportunities for you that are beyond, Rav Kook says, it's beyond your imagination, not only beyond what you think is possible, it's beyond anything you can even imagine. And you go and put a limit. You say, I want $5 million this year. Why limit it? Why $5 million? And who says it's going to be dollars at all? Maybe Hashem has something better for you than dollars. Why are you limiting? Why are you saying you want your prosperity in a particular currency? Why should it be that? We've got to be very careful to be open, to allow ourselves to work the tree and trust that the fruit will come. Hishtadlus is about la'ovda or l'shomra. Hishtadlus, working, is about working the tree. It's not about being responsible for the outcome. Because we can't be responsible for the outcome. What do we know about the outcome? All we can do is do the right things, invest in the way we best know how to invest, nurture, take care of the things, of the systems, of the trees, of the businesses, of the Torah, whatever it is that we're doing, just to take care of it and allow the fruit to emerge. That's what Tu B'Shvat comes to teach us. And then he says something amazing. So you can tell the difference between a Chiddush that was done before ROSH CHODESH and one that was done after ROSH CHODESH Shvat. And Torah is like a tree, he goes on to say, and then he goes on to say, and it was on the 11th month, Ho'il Moshe be'eretz HaTorah hazot lemor, Hainu Torah sheba'al peh, v'hu Rosh Hashanah, ken begashmiut hu Rosh Hashanah shematchilim ha'alienot l'tzii ba'aperot. You see what he's just done? He's inverted the whole thing. We think Tu B'Shvat is important because it's the Rosh Hashanah for the trees. He says no. Tu B'Shvat is the day that Moshe taught what it is to produce fruit from trees. But Moshe's fruit was Torah fruit. It was the idea of producing thoughts and ideas from a healthy body, which is the Torah shebichtav. The written Torah, that's the tree. And if one nurtures the tree and keeps the tree and loves the tree and works with the tree, the fruit comes. So that idea of taking care of the system, of the organism, and letting the fruit emerge, Moshe introduced that. That wasn't introduced by agriculture. That now created a time of the year which has a propensity for that kind of relationship. That introduced an energy into the month of Shvat that creates relationship between organism and product. Whether it's in the intellectual area, in the spiritual area, or in the business area, or in the agriculture area. It's the same koach. It's the same energy. The capacity of system and organism to produce product. If we invest what we need to in the system and we allow the product to emerge, that's something Moshe put into the Bria, and he put it into the Bria in Parshas Dvorim, in the first parsha of Sefer Dvorim. And then came Begashmiut. That's why also in our physical world, that's when the trees start developing their capacity to produce fruit, and that's why it's a good time to daven for your esrog on Tu B'Shvat, because that's the time that whole concept of producing fruit is at its most powerful. Ki hakol nivra b'Torah, v'an b'Sefer Yashal Rabbeinu Tam shekatav, ki ha'olam hu ki'ilan hafuch. Rabbeinu Tam writes in the Sefer HaYosher that the world is like an upside-down tree. Umitoch anafim navim hashoresh, and you can understand the roots from the branches. He believes that the roots are a kind of mirror reflection of the roots of the branches, and from the layer, the patterns of the branches, you can get an idea of what's underground and what there is underground. Imkein me olam hatachton navin ha'elyon. In the same way, what that means is, by understanding how the physical world works, you can understand how the spiritual world works. The physical world works with organisms and fruit as product. The spiritual world works exactly the same. The way you tend an orchard is the way you learn Torah. That's Eitz Chaim here. That's why there's that overlap between the physical and the spiritual. They're not two different worlds. They're just different reflections. They're different manifestations of the same energies, of the same principles. So Chochmah, wisdom, is to be able to look ahead. Ezehu chacham haro'eh et hanolad, the Gemara says in Talmud. A Chocham is somebody who sees et hanolad. What does hanolad mean? Somebody who has seen the birth of something, but then it's not a Chocham, everybody can see it. Somebody who can see that which has been conceived. It's not somebody who can see the future, that's a Novi. A Chocham is somebody who can notice that there's a new trend, that there's already a new trend before the trend comes. Somebody who's sensitive to emerging realities, and they can sense the emerging reality at its inception. That's a Chocham. And that's what we're talking about Tu B'Shvat. For Tu B'Shvat is to understand the esrog I need on the 15th of Tishrei later this year, or next year. That esrog is starting today. This is the time I've got to start taking care of that esrog. Maybe I'm not going to be the one to nurture the tree physically because I don't have the farm. I don't even know where this esrog is. I don't know how this esrog is going to find me, but it is going to find me. But I do know that with my tefillot, with my prayer, I can nurture this esrog tree. I can give it what for. That's a Chacham. There's that beautiful Gemara in Tainis where Rabbi Yochanan says about Choni HaMagal that he was always worried about when it says Shir HaMa'alot B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kechomim. When Hashem will eventually bring the redemption, we will have been like dreamers. And he's talking about the Galut Bavel, which was 70 years, and he says, Mi Ika Denayim Shivim Shona B'chalma. Is there anybody who can be asleep for 70 years? One day, here's the famous story, Azal Baruch Chazia Lahau Gavra Davenata Charuva. He saw an elderly man planting a carob tree. Amalei Hai Ad Kama Shanin Ta'in. How long is it going to take for this tree to bear fruit? You're investing in a system. You're investing in a tree. When do you expect the fruit? Amalei Ad Shivim Shonim. He said, about 70 years. Amalei Pshita Lach the Chayit Shivim Shonim. Are you so sure you're going to be alive in 70 years to eat the fruit? He says, when I was born, I walked into a world that was full of carob trees. Just as my fathers planted carob trees for me, I'm planting carob trees for my children. We need to invest even in that which is not going to bear fruit in our lifetime, because we've got to keep the system healthy. We've got to keep the planet healthy. We've got to keep the trees healthy. We've got to keep the communities of people healthy. We've got to keep the environment healthy. We've got to invest in this resources which are going to produce the products for the future. Whether we're part of that future or not isn't important. We are part of the future directly or indirectly, but we've got to see ourselves as part of that future and be willing to invest in that future. And so Chochmah is perceiving second and third order consequences. That's really, if you read Ray Dalio's work on second and third order consequences, he's describing a Chocham. A Chocham is somebody who understands not just the immediate consequences of the choices he makes, but he understands the second order consequences and he understands the third order consequences. That's Ro'eh et Hanolad. That's Chochmah. Hakara is different, and I'm talking today about the difference between Chochmah and Hakara. Chochmah is wisdom, which is being able to see second order and third order consequence. Hakara is recognizing second and third order causality. It's looking back. Ray Dalio doesn't talk about that. To understand the future, that's important. If you're going to invest, you need to understand second and third order consequence. But if you're going to be a moral and ethical human being, if you're going to be a person who's connected to Torah, in addition to being a chacham, you also have to be a makir tov. You have to be somebody who can see retrospectively, you can look backwards and can see second and third order causality. Like the beautiful Medrash where Ish Mitzri, where the daughters of Etrog come back from the well, and the father Yisro says, hey, you're a little earlier than usual. What happened? And they said, this Egyptian man was there and he helped us. It says the Medrash, Mashal le'echad sheneshacho ha'arod v'ayaratz liten raglav b'mayim. A man was bitten by a scorpion and he ran to the lake to put his foot in the water. Netanan le'nar, he puts his foot in the river, v'ra'at tinok echad shu shokea b'mayim. He looks up and he sees there's a little child struggling in the water, about to drown. V'shalach yado v'hitzilo, he goes out to the baby and he brings the young child back to the shore. Amar lo atinok, the child or the parent says, Ilulei atak farayiti meit, I owe my life to you. If it weren't for you, I would be dead. Amar lo lo ani tzalticha, ela ha'arod sheneshechani, uvarachti hemenu hu itzilcha. I didn't save you. It's the scorpion. When I was bitten by the scorpion, I said to myself, why me? Of all the people, why does the scorpion have to bite me? I've got a busy day ahead of me. Do I need this in my life? I was angry. I was angry at Hashem. I was angry at the scorpion. I was angry at myself. I was just crazy angry. I didn't realize that what he was doing was making sure that I'm in the right place at the right time to save you. So you owe the scorpion a debt of gratitude. So the daughters of Yisro said to Moshe, Yasher Koach, like people say after a shir, whether they understand the shir or they don't understand the shir, they say Yasher Koach. So they said Yasher Koach to Moshe. Do they understand what he did? Do they understand it? They said Yasher Koach. Amalei Moshe, Oto Mitzri sheharagti, hu itzil etchem. I killed an Egyptian. And because I killed an Egyptian, I had to flee. And because I had to flee, I happened to be here at this particular time. Here's the person you've got to. I just did what any normal human being would do. Any person would stand and see these young girls being bullied. They would step in and intervene. Anybody would do that. That's not the amazing thing. The amazing thing is that I was here. How does a man come from Egypt to be here where Yisro was, in Midian? How did that happen? It happened because of this Mitzri. That's who you need to thank. And that's why they said to their father, do you know why we're early? There's a long story, we'll tell you another time, but there was an Egyptian. It's a story about an Egyptian. Klomar, mi garam lezeh sheyavo etzleinu, ish mitzri shaharag, dalo dala dilia achat dala. And they talk then of how Moshe helped them take the water out of the well, which is significant, as you'll see in a moment. But what's important here is it's not about going to the dead Egyptian and giving his family a medal. It's not about finding the scorpion and putting him in the British Museum in a beautiful gold case. That's not what it's about. It's just about your own recognition. It's just about your realizing, your tracking back what brought you here. What is it? What coincidences had to happen? And we know there are no coincidences. What miracles had to happen to bring you here at this time, at this moment? And if all those miracles had to happen, you can be sure there's an important reason why you're here. For some reason, we're all here this evening. The statistical chances, if we would have looked at ourselves 20 years ago and said, what is the chance that on this particular day we would all be sitting in this particular shul, in this particular city of Yerushalim, at this particular time, learning about Tu B'Shvat together? I would say that any statistician would give a 0 chance of that happening. But it happened. So one has to look back and say, so what made it all happen? How did it happen? Who's responsible for it happening? And if so many things had to take place for it to happen, there must be some reason. I'm going to meet somebody here. I'm going to talk to somebody here. I'm going to encourage somebody here. I'm going to comfort somebody here. I'm going to learn something here. I'm going to teach them. Who knows what it is? Each one for their own reason. But Hashem doesn't do nisim if there's not an important reason. So tracking back to second and third order causality is not for the purpose of giving medals. It's just for the purpose of understanding how unusual and how special and how miraculous it is that we're here, and to understand that train of causality. So we have Chokhmah, which is seeing second and third consequence order forward, and we have Hakara, which is seeing second and third consequence order going backwards. And the esrog on Tu B'Shvat, to daven for an esrog on Tu B'Shvat, is really a combination of Chokhmah and Hakara, isn't it? Because you're looking forward and you're saying, I realize that if I don't daven for my esrog today, I miss it. Then it's kind of gone. My esrog is already on its way, and I didn't participate in its creation. The tree is already blossoming. I want to make a tefillah just before the tree blossoms. I want to make a tefillah on the day when this power of product and organism comes together, and the day that is designed for that energy, that's the day on which I want to make my tefillah. And if I miss that day, then it's gone. So I'm looking forward. I'm realizing that in 8 months' time, I need an esrog to find me. I'm going to daven now that esrog is created now, that will ultimately find me. But it's also a retrospect. It's also realizing that the esrog that I will have in Tishrei will have been created in Shvat. Being able to look back and understand where it happened and where it came from. This fact that the daughters of Yisro talk about Moshe pouring the water out, lifting the water out of the well, dalo dala, is quite interesting because, as the Sefer Yetzirah says, we always talk about the Sefer Yetzirah in these monthly shiurim, that the astrological constellation associated with Chodesh Shvat is Dili. It's Aquarius in English, but Aquarius is the bucket. It's not the water. In the Torah, in Kabbalah, the image, the metaphor, the icon for the month is Dli. It's the bucket, not the water. Now, why is that? We know the water is Torah. Torah is water. Surely water should be Shvat with everything we've said. And the Torah Moshe explains this Torah surely should be about water. But we need to understand that it's not about water. It's about the way you nurture the water, the way you take care of the water, the way you transport the water. It doesn't help having a tree in one place and having a well in another place. You've got to get the water from the well to the tree. And what do you do that with? You do it with a deli, you do that with a bucket, you do that with a container. We are the container of Torah. We are the instruments that utilize the Torah, that develop the Torah, that nurture the Torah, protect the Torah, transport the Torah, apply the Torah. We're dedicated to the Torah. And the Bnei Yisachar says also, it comes from Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon, and Ibn Ezra also quotes it, that even though we say Ein Mazal Yisrael, Jews don't have Mazal, we're above Mazal. It's not altogether right. Ki Mazal Dli hu Mazal Yisrael. Our Mazal is Dli. The Jews do have Mazal, and we need Mazal. But our Mazal is different from the Mazal of the other nations of the world. We have a choice. We can live with Mazal, where everything is just algorithms and luck and coincidence and it's random. We can live that way. Or we can be the bucket that takes care of the Torah. We can choose to engage with the Torah. We can choose to nurture the system, the organism that produces the fruit of the world, the fruit of well-being, the fruit of prosperity, the fruit of everything. We can choose to be the farmers. We don't have to be the consumers. It's so interesting that we live in such a consumerist society, particularly in the United States, but all over the world, certainly the developed world, we've become very consumerist. And to take ourselves out of consumerism and see ourselves as producers, as farmers, producers of Torah, not consumers of Torah. It's quite interesting. My son pointed out to me that for the first time in history, it now takes less time to produce content than to consume content. You can create a shiur faster than you can listen to one. You can create an essay, you can create an article, you can create a speech, you can paint a painting, you can make a poem quicker than you can consume it. That's never been before. It's always, the ratio has always been very much to the converse. To consume it is quite quick. To produce it, how long does it take to make a poem? Now you get onto ChatGPT or one of the others and you got it in 2 minutes, and that's quite good. And it's the same in Torah. We're going to be living in a world with infinite content. And our choice is now going to be, do you want to be consumers of infinite content? And what happens when something is infinite? Its value is zero. Isn't that right? As the supply reaches infinity, so the value goes to zero. Do we want to be part of that world where we're consuming this garbage that is just produced all the time, where you don't even know, was it a human or was it a robot? You can hardly even tell. Does it make a difference? There, Baruch Ber goes back to the Talmud the next day to say, I worked on this for hours and now I'll tell it to you. And it's the real thing. What I told you last night was AI. It just came out of my mind. It was artificial and it happens to have been right. But it wasn't the fruit of effort. What I'm giving you now is the fruit of effort. It's different. Do you want a painting that somebody has spent years painting? Or do you want a reproduction that some AI instrument has created in a minute or two? Do you want to read a book that a human being has spent a lifetime writing and put a life of life experience into the book? Or do you want to read something that artificial intelligence has created? How are we going to spend our lives? Consuming garbage or producing gems? Are we going to nurture the trees or are we going to pluck the fruit? That's our choice. And that's the choice of this time. That's the choice of this era that we're moving into. This era of mountainous volumes of product, of whether it's intellectual product or it's physical product and commodities, mountainous volumes of it. And individuals, few individuals who are willing to invest the time and energy to be the artists of the world, to nurture and produce, take care of the organism and trust that the product is going to be beautiful. The product is going to be real. And you know what? You will find that the fruit that is produced by AI or its agricultural equivalent will be quite perfect. They'll breed it to perfection. And as one already finds in the United States and other parts of the world, there's fruit that looks magnificent and tastes like nothing. And the fruit that will come from your tree, that you will nurture, won't look like that. It won't be perfect. It will have flaws because it will be real and it will be authentic. Do you want the fruit with the flaws that is real, or do you want the plastic fruit that is perfect? That's a choice that you've got. When I was young and I was selling pearls to jewelers, that was my profession, that was my business at that time. And I went with a lot of hope to a particular jeweler who became a good friend of mine, and I wanted to sell him a very expensive strand of 10.5 millimeter pearls. I don't know in today's money what that would have been, but probably nearly $100,000. And I thought there was a good chance. He looked at me and said, young man, I'm going to buy this from you on one condition, that you can explain to me why I should buy this one from you rather than go to the supermarket down the road and buy an artificial one which will look just as good, probably better. I was stumped. I actually couldn't tell him why he should spend $100,000 on something that looks no different than an item that costs $5. What am I going to say if I'm going to be honest? So I had to say, Mr. Kaplan, his name was, you're right. I don't think you should buy it. He said, I'm now going to teach you what I learned when I was exactly in your position. He said, I was asked that question, but I had an answer. And I'll give you my answer and you can use it next time you try and sell these pearls. What was your answer? He said, my answer was, you're right. If you look at the two strands of pearls, they look the same. One's worth $100,000, one's worth $5, and you can't tell the difference. But invite two girls out to a ball. Give the plastic pearls to the one and give the real pearls to the other. And watch the difference in the way they walk. That's what authenticity means. The real thing affects who you are. It's not what you've got. What you've got is a strand of beads. Who you are is affected by the authenticity of what you've produced. And whether it's an idea in Torah, or it's an idea in the wisdom of the world, an idea in mathematics or in science or in medicine, or it's an idea in interrelationships, or it's a product, or it's a poem, or it's an essay. It doesn't matter what it is. It's yours. You made it. And you didn't make it synthetically. You took care of the organism, and the organism made it. You took care, you're a machzik b'Torah, a machazikim bo. You invested in the Torah. A little bit of Torah might be a Rashi on the parasha you learn for Shabbos. It doesn't matter what it is. But invest in it. Don't pluck it. Don't go online and pluck stuff. Don't open books and pluck stuff. Whether it's the Daf Yomi that you're learning, or the parasha that you're learning, or the newspaper that you're reading, don't pluck. Try and nurture the tree and enjoy the fruit that the tree produces, because that's what Tu B'Shvat is all about. That's what Tu B'Shvat comes to teach us. That's what Tu B'Shvat enables us to understand and to accomplish in our lives and in the lives of the Jewish people, of Klal Yisrael as a whole.